This is Purser Explores the World, and I'm James Purser. In June 2011, an 83-year-old woman in Belgium underwent surgery to replace her diseased lower jaw with a prosthetic. This in itself was not a new thing. People have been using prosthetics since the year dot. What made this different was the nature of the prosthetic and how it was made. Before I go on, can I just say that I never, ever want to see another picture of a diseased jaw again. The things I do for this podcast. Anyway, there are a number of different methods to replace diseased jawbone. The most popular appears to be transplantation of healthy bone from another part of the body, closely followed by the custom moulding of replacement prosthetics out of either silicon or medical-grade titanium. What makes this prosthetic different is the fact that it wasn't moulded from bone, nor was it a mass-produced implant. Instead, it was printed from a 3D model generated from scans of the patient's jaw. Layer upon layer of powdered titanium was fused by laser to build the new jaw. It was then coated in medical-grade ceramic to ensure that the patient's body wouldn't reject it. The surgery was so successful that the patient was talking the same day and eating normally the next. This is big news. Please note the capitalization of the words and the quote marks around them. The implications of this sort of technology are huge. Medically, we now have the ability to replace shattered and diseased bone and give people a chance at a normal life again. Even beyond the purely medical, we are at the point where we can start modifying the body to deal with different tasks. The imagination can run riot with all of this. 3D printing isn't just enabling us to replace bone, it's creating new possibilities for people who have lost limbs. Scott Summit is the founder of a company called Bespoke Innovations, a company that specializes in producing custom fairings, that is, the outer shells of artificial limbs.
Well, we do a lot of things. That's kind of the first message, is that there's no one thing that we do.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that we're most public with are the what we call the fairings, which are for prosthetics, and it's a way to give a person their body shape back. But that is kind of one instantiation of a number of things that are kind of all in the same area, which tap into the idea of three-dimensional scanning the body, doing a manipulation or a design or anything based on that, and then three-dimensionally printing something to result.
Okay, so what else do you do apart from the fairings on limbs then?
There are, we can't go into specifics, of course, because everything else is R&D, but
Yep.
I can say it's a pretty broad array of exoskeletal, largely medical and lifestyle type products that are meant to serve a task that relates to the musculature or the skeletal system. And we can, because of the nature of the process, we can offer a flexibility. We can add details, we can add functionality and comfort and quality of living for the people in ways that just no other product that traditionally would have served that purpose could.
All right, so you are best well known for your work with artificial limbs and producing the fairings that go around at the outside. Why don't we go into that?
Sure. Yeah, so the fairing is actually the very first way ever, as far as I know, that a person who has lost a limb can regain a sense of symmetry. We don't go for absolute symmetry, but we get pretty close. And just to restore a person their overall shape back is one of the fundamental goals. So things, basic luxuries that people don't realize are we let somebody's pants fit right, and their clothing hangs right, and their socks wrap the way they're familiar with, instead of with around kind of these very utilitarian, raw, pragmatic mechanical parts, which is more the norm for a prosthetic limb.
Because they are jarringly fake, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, what we do is our goal is to make a product that is unapologetically man-made.
Mm-hmm.
So because sometimes there are people in the medical world that will create a prosthetic limb cover that will look beige and that will try to emulate human, and we don't. That's just not the world that we're in.
Yep.
We instead try to say that this is something not to hide or to be try to camouflage, but instead to celebrate, to really play up. And instead, we try to make it the coolest thing in somebody's life, so that it's not something intended to be hidden, but instead it's something that somebody can't wait to show the world.
Some things that somebody can be proud of, and some that they can say, look at this.
Yeah, this is the coolest motorcycle that you've ever had that you get to drive up to high school in. If we can, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
yeah.
If we can give a person that sense of a 16-year-old going to high school with the coolest motorcycle imaginable, then maybe we've rephrased the whole story.
All right, so what's the process? What's the process? Somebody comes to you and says, okay, I have an artificial limb, it looks really stupid, I don't like it, help.
Right, so what we do is, and that's a very typical conversation, a lot of times people come to us and they will have approximated a leg shape with bubble wrap and duct tape. As cynical as that sounds, it really speaks to the human nature as far as the urge to recreate one sense of physicality.
Well, it goes to the phantom pain as well, doesn't it? I mean, there's that whole psychological aspect.
And we would love to study that. I hope sometime I'll have the time to communicate with some of the people doing phantom pain research. There's a guy actually in Los Angeles who's the leader in that area. And I've read his book, and I want to contact him to find out if we can use this as that kind of tool to address morphogenic pain. So instead, what we're focusing on is saying, well, that we can we talk to the person and get a sense. Well, we get a sense for who they are and what they're looking for, mainly. And if it's something that they plan to showcase, to show the world, if it's something that they are going to be using in sports, if it's something for more of a sense of fashion. Some people are very, very fashion-oriented. So there are a lot of different things that might connect our product with somebody. So we try to really suss that out of them. And we also try to get a good sense of their design sensibility, too. Are they understated? Are they more flashy? Are they trendy? Are they classic? Are they bold, more mechanical, more fluid? What is that aesthetic sensibility? And it's very hard because that's something that you can't actually ask somebody. You can't ask somebody to describe their sensibility because it's fairly personal and also it's fairly abstract terms. So we try to ask them a certain range of questions that might really give them, that might help them clarify those opinions. And we also have a number of different pre-existing palettes and designs and things like that to choose from. Some people come to us and have very strong opinions. They want chrome here, and or they don't like shiny chrome, but they want matte chrome, or they want black leather, and they want laser tattoos and things like that. And that's great because it means they're that much more emotionally invested in the outcome.
You get a lot of cyberpunk type people coming through who want that cyberpunk look and feel for their limbs.
We haven't had cyberpunk yet. I can't wait for the day when we do, because our favorite people are actually people with very pronounced opinions. We had a guy recently, it was great working with him. He was a professional bodybuilder, and so he was just this big pile of muscle, and he had these crazy tattoos all over and a shaved head, and nicest guy in the world. But he wanted something that would really accentuate this very chiseled, sculpted musculature that he had. So we created lines that really reflected that. We actually looked in anatomy books to reflect the muscle breakups in the parts that we create. We created extra contour lines. And then we created patterns like you might find in a car, a pattern across the front of it, and that was this it didn't speak to the human body, but it did say kind of built for business, strong, built to last.
Does he get extra points in competitions for it?
It'll be interesting to see. I can't imagine how he lifts these 1,000-pound weights or whatever he does with an artificial limb. I'm amazed that that's who he is. One of the things that's kind of fascinating about just being in this industry is you never stop being amazed by the people that you deal with. I'm dealing with people who are triathletes or Ironman athletes, and they're missing an entire leg all the way up to the hip. Or they will have They're doing these incredible, modeling acts, modeling or performing, or sports, or who knows what, and they're missing a pretty substantial part of their body. And that's one of the things that gives you that constant reminder of, okay, what's my excuse?
Yep.
It's like if that's what they're doing with some pretty serious challenges, it's a reminder that the rest of us have it pretty easy by comparison. I'm just always impressed by the people I work with.
So what made you turn to 3D printing for all of this?
3D printing is a solution looking for a problem for the most part. Like you said, that 90% of it is novelties, and people going, wow, we can 3D print anything. Okay, I'll 3D print my face, And so it's a lot of just kind of, like a lot of new technology. The technology comes out, and then we sit and stare at it, like a Christmas present, and wonder, okay, now what do we do with it? In this case, I've been involved in the technology for 20 years, since it was really born. But what I was intrigued by is that I was also very interested in looking at special needs. My mother was a special education teacher, so I was always surrounded all my life by kids with all kinds of disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things you realize is that there isn't one size fits all when you're talking about unique needs, especially for the human body and for the human sensibility, that design and taste. There is not a one size fits all. And in light of that, then you need a tool that is really versatile to speak to individual variation, individual needs. And so mass production just doesn't cut it. And I think that's one of the things that I find especially off-putting about the current state of affairs with prosthetic limbs, is that it's trying to use a mass-produced approach to address an individualized need.
So
and I find that very disjointed. And I find the results very disjointed.
I'm assuming the pun's not intended.
So to speak, good point.
Sorry about that. I'm terrible with puns like that.
Everything is puns in our business. We're talking about if our business model has legs, it's like
if
no way around them.
Somebody needs a leg up, or if you can get a foothold on in some market.
Somebody recently asked about our carbon footprint.
Oh dear. And did you say it depends on the size of the customer's foot?
I should have if I was that quick thinking.
Okay, so you do the prosthetics now, and what would you like to see down the track? I mean, with this sort of printing and technology, can it move to advanced? See, with this sort of printing and the ad hoc stuff that you do, the on-demand stuff, you can do a lot more in terms of developing the limbs themselves rather than just the fairings.
Yes. Well, that's funny you mentioned, because that's where it all started. So I took a year off to teach, and then another year off just to do research. And so I lived up in the mountains, kind of cloistered away, and actually made a couple limbs that could be walked on, where the entire leg was three-dimensionally printed.
Mm-hmm.
And my thinking is, hey, if you're going to create something like this, if you're able to, you can develop it for the developing countries. And how cool would this be if I could drop myself down into Cambodia with nothing more than a camera, take a bunch of pictures of somebody, turn that into data, 3D print the result, and then 2 weeks later they're walking off with the best leg ever for very low cost. So that was, at a very low carbon footprint, recyclable, everything about it positive, unstealable, addresses their psychology as well as their morphology, everything good. So that was the drive behind it, and that's still like my background drive that I want to be able to achieve. One of the things I found, though, is that 3D printing right now for a full leg, it's about $4,000, which is unbelievably cheap, except for Cambodia's perspective, where they're saying, hey, wait, that's a lot of money. That's more than a village makes. So it's just not suited. And so what I would like to see is the costs get to the point where that is a realistic dream, where that's possible to print at the cost where it is applicable towards a lot of developing countries. That would be one area. I would like to see being able to actually live up to that dream, being able to scan somebody with a standard tourist camera, use cloud computing to do all the generation, and then print it and have the person walk off. It's actually totally possible. We need two things. We need the costs of the printing to come down, and we need the R&D budget to go up. We don't have the kind of R&D budget to pursue that. So my prototypes are literally shelved. They are sitting in front of me on a shelf until that day arrives.
Have you approached some of the charities that work with, let's say, landmine victims or something like that, like the UN or other groups?
Yeah, I've approached a couple different agencies, and their response, reasonably so, says it tends to be along the lines of, we love the idea. Right now, they actually have a very different goal. They have a cap of something like $300, and they say, okay, how much can you get for $300 or $400? Not how good a product is it, and how low can we drive the cost.
Yep.
So they are coming at it with a very different calculus.
All right, before we go, what is the weirdest limb you've ever had to print?
Wow. Well, I'll throw out a couple of just interesting cases. We very often get cases from soldiers where they will step on a mine or be involved in an explosion, and they lose both limbs. And so what we have to do then is find a suitable, what we call a morphology donor, which is somebody who is willing to essentially donate their morphology to the person who's lost both legs, because we can't three-dimensionally scan their other leg and mirror it in that instance. So we have a morphology donor release form that we have them fill out so they can legally become scanned, and we can legally then have access to their personal morphology, which we don't know if it's needed, but we had a lawyer draft it up anyway just because it's like a photograph, but different. And we figured that somebody's eventually going to catch us for it if we use their morphology against their will.
That's my legs walking over there.
There's that. We have... we just had recently a woman, we were designing her legs. We were about to send them out, and her doctor called us up and said, stop the presses, literally. She decided she wanted to be 1 3/4 inches taller. And so we took the geometry, and actually, since she was missing both legs, we were able to run it through the program that stretched it. So it stretched her 1 3/4 inches.
So you get a lot more cosmetic stuff too, don't you, in that respect? People get to do more, instead of just being prosthetic, it's really cosmetic in the way that they can change the way they look, they change the way they feel.
Yeah, well, cosmetic might be one term. I tend to use words like designed, because it is that's really what somebody's doing. This is like the design of your car, the design of your motorcycle, or the design of your body. People design their own body with watches or eyewear or all the choices that they make to adorn themselves. We see this as another one that simply isn't as mass-oriented as eyewear and bracelets and watches, but we see it in the same general mental category. It is certainly funky. It's we have student groups come through here all the time, and they kind of walk away with their jaws dropped, which is always fun.
Well, you could always print them a new one.
We haven't gotten the jaws yet, but we are working our way through the body piece by piece.
Thanks to Scott for taking the time out, and apologies for some of the puns, they were truly horrendous. However, the underlying idea isn't. Losing a limb is a life-changing event, one that I hope that I never have to experience, and one that I hope nobody ever has to. But giving people the ability to truly make their prosthetics an expression of themselves rather than just something they have to strap on every day can only be a good thing. Imagine if Scott or someone else can get the idea of a mobile production facility working. Take that into areas where there is a high incidence of limb loss through, say, landmines or other unexploded ordnance. And then not only can you be aiding in their psychological healing, but you could better engineer the core features of the limb to suit the patient. The interest in medical 3D printing isn't just limited to the development of prosthetics. While they are the lowest hanging fruit, so to speak, there are a number of groups who are working towards developing the technology to print tissue, and not just any tissue. We're talking the ability to use the patient's own stem cells to print replacement organs. The basic premise, and please understand that I'm paraphrasing here, is that you use 3D printing to produce the lattice around which the new organ will grow. As the organ grows, the lattice degrades, and voila, you have your new kidney, liver, pancreas, or offal of choice. They're still well into the research stage of this sort of thing, however they are already having some success with growing tissue for research purposes. One of the companies I approached for an interview for this episode, Organovo, manufactures tissue printers, for want of a better word, for use in biomedical research. The devices print tissue from a medium which is then allowed to develop and is used to test a variety of different things. Unfortunately, while that all sounds very cool, I wasn't actually able to secure an interview. Organovo has also developed a process for printing blood vessels. This again has enormous ramifications. Now, instead of having to transplant blood vessels from one part of the body to another, say if you're doing a valve transplant or an artery transplant, surgeons can grow the vessels to their exact requirements, directly from the patient's stem cells. This cuts down on surgery time, which then cuts down on recovery time, and in general makes things a lot easier. As you can see, the development of 3D printing in the medical world has massive implications for everyone. We're approaching the day when person-to-person transplantation of organs, now the only option available to people who need new organs, could be a thing of the past. The development of augmented humans has taken a huge step forward thanks to the idea of print your own bones. And even artificial limbs are becoming works of art rather than just utilitarian devices. Okay, that's it from me for now. In 2 weeks, I'll be back to talk about community power generation. In both senses, I guess. Until then, this has been an Angry Beanie production. Don't forget, all links from this episode will be up on the Angry Beanie subreddit, and you can catch up with earlier episodes at angrybeanie.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and circle us on Google+.